Hey, Happy New Year, everyone. It's Ryan Ripley. Just wanted to provide a bonus episode this week since we kind of went silent in December due to the holidays and festivities and all of that. So first of all, Happy New Year, and hopefully you enjoy this midweek show. So what this is, I went on Vasco Duarte's Scrum Master Toolbox Podcast, and we did a bonus Christmas episode for his podcast about Agile Coaching, what it means to coach, practical ways to be a better coach, things like that. Really good conversation. Thought I would share it over here. Because first of all, Vasco's podcast is excellent. Really enjoy his Scrum Master Toolbox podcast. And secondly, I'm hoping that many of you will also enjoy the content that we put together over there as well. So yeah, check it out. At the end is one of my favorite Agile for Humans episodes, so you've probably heard it. It's with Woody Zuhl and a number of other coaches where we just continue to dig into this topic. But I think it's a great show to start on for the new year, and I hope you enjoy it. Also wanted to thank all of you for supporting the show. Many of you go out there, you share your episodes or share these episodes with your friends, your family, your coworkers. You've rated us on iTunes and left us great reviews. Thanks, and continue to do that, please. There's a mailing list, so on the right side of ryanripley.com, you can sign up and subscribe. There's a listener survey that helps me know who's out there, the demographics, and possible promotion later. And even Patreon. We're trying a Patreon experiment. So if you want to check out Patreon, there's a link in the show notes if you'd like to further support the show. Otherwise, I hope you enjoy this episode. Check it out. Leave some comments. Check out Vasco's podcast. It's excellent. And just leave me some notes on the website. Let me know what you're thinking, what 2018 could look like for you, what you want to hear covered, some possible guests. Hit me up on the website or on Twitter at Ryan Ripley, and let's make 2018 an awesome year. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening to this brief intro. And now on to my interview with Vasco Duarte.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this special week. This week we have 5 episodes with 5 great thought leaders in the Agile space. In this particular episode, we interview Ryan Ripley, the host of the Agile for Humans podcast, about coaching and how important that is for us as Scrum Masters. So happy holidays and happy listening. Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox Podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Hello, everybody. Welcome to one bonus episode with Ryan Ripley. Hi, Ryan. Welcome back to the show.
Hey, Vasco. Thanks for having me back.
So, Ryan has been on the show before. He was on the show on the week of the 21st of January 2016. So that's almost like 2 years ago, Ryan. Wow.
Man, it's been too long since we've talked, Vasco.
Absolutely. So the episodes 261 to 265 were Ryan's episodes. So you can go ahead and check what he said back then. But today we have Ryan back for a discussion and conversation around coaching. Since as Scrum Masters, we do a lot of coaching, or at least we should be aware of the coaching stance and the approach that coaching brings to our work. So Ryan loves helping people do great work. He's a servant leader, and at heart, he's passionate about fostering safety and trust in the workspace. He's also a fellow podcaster at the Agile for Humans podcast. And for all of you guys listening, we'll actually have Ryan's episode right after this one. At the end, if you listen to the end, there's actually one of Ryan's best episodes for you to listen to and learn more about the Agile for Humans podcast. So Ryan, that was a short introduction to you, but a lot has happened since we talked on the podcast nearly 2 years ago. So tell us a little bit more about you. What has been happening?
Yeah, I think since then, my wife and I had our third child, so I now have a daughter.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. I've become a professional Scrum trainer through Scrum.org, so I'm now actually training people on how to do professional Scrum through the great organization Scrum.org. I'm also coaching and at an internal company in Chicago, Illinois. So I've actually moved my family from a previous location and position. We're now living in Northwest Indiana, but working in Chicago. So new child, new job, moved. pretty much all the major stressors you can have in a life, but it's all been really good change.
So the only thing you're missing now is building a house.
Well, we bought a house. We didn't build, though. So
Yeah.
we were close. We drew the line at building the house. We couldn't, the 3 stressors were enough.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of stuff to think about, and where the experience and perspective of a coach definitely helps with all of that stress. So we'll talk about coaching today. So let's start with the basics for our audience here. So when we talk about coaching, Ryan, what is it that you specifically mean when you talk about coaching, and what does being a coach mean for a Scrum Master?
Yeah, I think coaching is a very loaded term. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people walking around calling themselves coaches where perhaps they've not taken the time to build all of those skills. I probably fall into that boat too. I think coaching is actually a profession. There's a professional coaching skill set, and it's actually a real career path. And so it's a very complicated and complex activity. If we take it from the scope of a Scrum Master, I think coaching is really about revealing insights about the systems of work without trying to resolve them. And that's how I think a professional Scrum Master can approach coaching and keep it scoped like that, and it stays manageable. And so what I mean is, instead of trying to solve every problem the team comes up with, let's reveal an insight. Let's make an observation, and then see if self-organization still happens. Can the team take that insight and actually turn it into something actionable that improves the way they work? And if we can get to that point as a Scrum, I think we've started to understand coaching. I think we've started to understand what that stance looks like. And most importantly, we've preserved and enhanced self-organization, which I think is critical to our coaching practice.
So give me a concrete example, Ryan. So when you talk about revealing an insight, like what would that look like as a Scrum Master?
So let's say that your team is continually having carryover work, sprint over sprint. And so you're noticing that over and over, the team is either overcommitted or they're being forced to overcommit by a product owner or by a manager. Or for some reason or another, they believe they can do more work than what they're actually doing sprint over sprint. And so as a Scrum Master, I've seen it where they become very prescriptive. And they say, you will not commit to more than 3 stories the next sprint because you're not getting your work done. And that's certainly one approach, but I don't think it fosters self-organization. And I don't think it preserves the team's agency to decide how to do their work. So instead, perhaps during a sprint retrospective, you could ask a powerful question. And one of those questions could look like, it could be very direct. Why are we carrying our work over sprint and jeopardizing our sprint goal? That's a very direct question. But it opens up the conversation to the team, and it allows them to discuss what's going on. And you might find out, because the team's closest to the work, they have more insights than perhaps a Scrum Master would, that some things come forward and there are some impediments to deal with. But the team's coming up with those impediments, and the team's coming up with possible solutions, and the team is self-organizing and figuring out how to fix this issue.
So when we talk about self-organization, Ryan, I understand that you know what you mean, but let's break it down, right? So what would it look like for us to actually be able to help a team get even more self-organized? Give me an example of a transition that you've seen in a team you've coached to go from less self-organized to more self-organized using the coaching approach.
Yeah, and so I think from a Scrum Master perspective, holding off on solving the problems can actually lead to greater self-organization. So a concrete example, there was a team that I was working with, and they were suffering constant interruptions from people coming in and out of their work area. And they raised it as an impediment to me as the Scrum Master. And I thought to myself, this is a problem that the team can solve themselves, and they can solve it in a way that's more meaningful to them. And so instead of solving their impediment, I asked them, what are ways that you could go about preventing these interruptions? And it's a series of questions. What I find is that the more questions I'm asking, the less solutions I'm dictating, the better the self-organization can occur. And so in this case, it was really, what can we do as a team to stop the interruptions? And so the team members started putting up little sign cards on their laptops. If they're not available, it was red. If they were available, it was green. And so they just put up these little cues that made it either acceptable or unacceptable to interrupt them.
And they came up with those ideas, right?
That was their idea, to put little cards up on their laptops. And so suddenly the interruptions plummet. People got the message that, wow, there's red placards on all of these laptops, and they left them alone. But it was the team's idea, the team's ingenuity. We had these cards made up after they designed them, and they were able to own that solution. And just that little thing taught them that, hey, we're powerful. We can solve our own impediments. We can learn how to self-organize a little better. It was a great message that they sent. It was good.
Okay, so I think you said something there I want to explore a little bit further, because I think it might be actually one of the keys for us to unraveling what coaching means for us. You said, hold off on solving the problems that the team can solve themselves. And of course, one question that I get all the time is, what about my team? They just started with Scrum. I mean, should I go straight into trying to coach them? What's your view on the evolution of the Scrum Master role towards the team in terms of coaching, as the team, starts from being very novice, like just starting with Scrum, and then progressing on that Scrum adoption journey?
Yeah, I think it's a spectrum. I think in the beginning with a new team, we have to be a little more prescriptive than what we would like to be. And so early on, the questions might be a little bit more direct. Like, hey, is there a way that this team could solve this problem? Or how would you all go about solving this problem? And I think we have to be a little more direct, but we still need to hold the space and try to reveal observations and not resolve issues. But I think you're right. With a novice team, there is a slightly different stance, and that stance is a little more direct. It's a little more prescriptive. I think there's more training involved too. So there's going to be more opportunities to take a situation and turn it into a teachable moment. But I think over time, there's this progression where they continue to improve, they understand the concepts, and eventually, a lot of the prescriptive practices can fall away, and the teams really can start taking over their own practices.
So, and you mentioned something that, coaches are, of course, familiar with that term and perhaps even familiar with the practice, but break it down for us. When you coach, what does hold the space mean, and how do you put it into practice?
So for me, I'm not comfortable with silence, and I had to learn to become comfortable with silence. So after asking a question like, when I'm talking to the team about interruptions, what can we as a team do to limit the interruptions in our workspace? You have to be comfortable with sitting there and being very, very quiet. And so eventually someone other than yourself will break the silence because the tension grows and grows and grows. And it's not a negative kind of tension. It's just the room is quiet, people get a little uncomfortable, and finally someone will give an answer to that question if you just wait. And for me, holding the space simply means shutting my mouth and letting someone else step up and give an answer.
Yeah, that's a very concrete way of describing it. I really like that approach. And obviously, for people who grow into the Scrum Master role, typically people who feel ownership and who feel accountable for, the improvements around them, it's hard to hold off on speaking their piece, right? So how did you train yourself? How did you teach yourself to hold the space in the form of, just holding the silence?
Yeah, so it's really... For me, it was remembering that the Scrum Master role is that of servant leadership. So this whole journey of being a Scrum Master, it's not about me. And it's not about how brilliant I am. It's not about how smart I look. It's not about my ability to shine and solve problems. It's how I can help the team. And so I have to remind myself of that pretty regularly, because I think, when we come from backgrounds of project management or software development, especially like I do, the pull is to solve all the problems. And you have to really fight against that and realize this is not about you. This is about the team. This is about their ability to enhance their practices, enhance their self-organization, and for them to grow. And if you can remind yourself of that, and just remember that you're here for them to serve them, I think that can help anchor you. I also think the Scrum Values help me out quite a bit. So it takes courage to stand there and hold the space in a room. It takes commitment to the Scrum Master role to actually decide that you're going to put others before yourself. I think it takes an openness. You have to be pretty open with the team about what you're doing and be very transparent in order to serve them. I mean, it's all the values along with just realizing this is about them. It's not about me.
Absolutely. So I'm reminded of an episode I recorded with Jeff Kosichu. One of the first few episodes I remember, and he was talking about his experience as a Scrum Master. And I think he described what you just described. He described that in a way that only a musician can, right? He said, I'm the background instrument that provides the platform on which the team can succeed.
Yeah, definitely. And I think Jeff's super smart guy up in Canada, I think. And I think that's a beautiful way to put it. We kind of set the beat, but it's up for the team to fill in the rest.
Absolutely. We'll put the links to the show notes and to the Scrum Values in the show notes, and also to Jeff Kosichu's episode, which is the success episode where he talks about his role as a background instrument. This is kind of a trend that I see in many of the episodes where we talk about the success of a Scrum Master, where people say that, you know, we are there to help others succeed. Now, that looks totally different when we talk about advanced teams. So in your mind, Ryan, what is the biggest difference between, you know, working with beginner teams and working with well-oiled performing teams when it comes to coaching and your role as a Scrum Master?
Yeah, I actually think the more advanced teams are far more challenging for a Scrum Master, because you're right. What do we do now that the team understands self-organization? They're cross-functional. They're delivering a high-quality, valuable increment every sprint. They understand the Scrum roles, the values, the events, the rules. They understand all of this very well. So what's next? And I think this is where Scrum Masters have a chance to really grow themselves, because our questions have to get better and our insights have to become deeper and our ability to coach has to become even more subtle, because by this point, the team knows all of our tricks, right? You know, they know that we're going to ask a powerful question and we're going to hold the space and we're going to pause. And so they answer a little faster and they start seeing some of the curveballs. And so we have to up our game. And I think this is a really exciting time for a Scrum Master to dig into professional coaching, facilitation, mentoring. The path that I've gone down with the professional Scrum trainer, really deepening my training skills so that I can work with these teams on a next level. I think this is a reflective moment for a Scrum Master, and it's a wonderful time and opportunity to step our games up as well.
So tell us a little bit more about how your journey has been. What books have you read? What conferences have you attended? Where have you gone for that knowledge that you talk about when you say that we need to up our game as Scrum Masters working with advanced teams?
I'm actually very lucky. I have a lot of good friends and mentors. Don Gray is a good friend and fellow coach here in the U.S. He recently sent me Zen in the Martial Arts by Joe Hymas. And it's really, this book has been phenomenal. It's about katas and mental stances and just how this all works in the martial arts, and how there's just so many parallels to Agile coaching. So I'm starting to read things like that. I've been revisiting the Lean Startup. I really think that there's some gaps in coaching, or at least in practices, because we start at point A and we're trying to get to point B developing software, but are we validating that what we're setting up to build is really right? And so I'm finding some very interesting ideas around combining Scrum and Lean Startup. And so part of it is, you know, looking at these different ideas from coaches, like the book Zen and the Martial Arts, like I mentioned. But another idea that I've been looking at is just combining things. And I think Lean Startup combined with Scrum is fascinating as well. I know there's work right now on even combining Scrum and Kanban. And so really these days I'm thinking about the combination of ideas. I'm especially interested in validated learning. So we get to the point where we've delivered an increment of software, but how do we know it was valuable? Does anyone actually stop and check that? And if we do, how do we measure it? So those are the kind of things lately that I'm doing to try to improve. As far as conferences go, I'm a big fan of the TechWell conferences. I'm actually speaking at Better Software Con this week. I'm actually here in Orlando, Florida. So I'm sure there's some great conferences coming up next year. But lately, besides that, I'm really focused on the trainer stuff as well. How do I become a better Scrum trainer? How do I help teams really understand and hit the ground running with Scrum? And that's where my mind's at today.
And of course, let's not forget, you also record a regular podcast where you get to interview amazing people and learn from them directly.
That's actually, and I'm amazed that I forgot to plug the podcast. So thanks for that. But you're right. Agile for Humans is a weekly opportunity to talk to amazing people, and just to get to steal some knowledge from them for an hour and then share it with the audience. And that podcast, just sitting down and talking to so many people, I'm sure you've had the same effect where these ideas just start seeping into your mind, and somehow you've been leveled up just by recording a podcast. But it's been very powerful for me as well.
Absolutely. So that's my biggest learning from recording this podcast now for nearly 3 years has been that no matter what the level of experience of the person who you interview, and we've interviewed guys like, David Marquet and people who've started Scrum Mastering a year ago. So like there's been all kinds of levels of experience, but no matter the level of experience, you always get to learn from the different perspectives that people have. And I would say that if we want to take that further in terms of, combining ideas like Lean Startup and Scrum, for example, that you mentioned, I would say combine perspectives, right? Like see the world with different eyes, trigger that beginner's mind that Arlo Belshi talked about in his promiscuous pairing paper, which is still one of the most amazing papers I've read about building real teamwork, real collaboration.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And this new adventure with training, the professional Scrum trainer initiatives that I've been doing, I get to see beginners regularly now, and just seeing things through their eyes, their mindset, revisiting the beginner mind. I mean, it's powerful. It really has reinforced a lot of the things that I thought I knew. It's taught me some new things that I'd probably forgotten, and it's fun to spend time in that space.
So as we progress in our role as Scrum Masters, and maybe we start looking into coaching and try to understand, where do I want to go, and do I really want to work with advanced teams? Then how do I up my game? Do I want to focus on teams that are just starting because, maybe my organization is starting their agile transformation right now? So Ryan, if you were about to start that journey today, like where would you start your coaching journey? What should we try first?
So it's a good question. I think it's going to be team dependent. But if I'm a new coach starting my journey as a coach, and I think I would rather be with a newer team and let's grow and learn together. I think as a coach, though, it starts with the fundamentals. And so if you're with a new team, you may have to be a little prescriptive and do a lot of training and discussions around Scrum and how it works, and what are the events, and what's the purpose, and how does empiricism work. And you have a large body of knowledge to impart on people. And the quicker you can do that, the more likely you are to get to releasing increments of valuable software frequently. And so I think you start with the fundamentals, just like a basketball coach has the team shoot free throws every practice. It's a fundamental skill.
And exactly. And actually, let me take that further, because I think that the metaphor holds water very much for us as well. You mentioned basketball. I would use soccer, right? But it's the same thing,
sure,
right? Even the best players in the world will continue to repeat the same basic skills and gestures throughout their whole career. They're like the best free kicker in the world. That would be Beckham some years ago, maybe Ronaldo these days, I don't know. Then the best free throw in basketball, the best three-pointer in basketball, they will continue to practice those things forever. It's not because they're the best that they stop, right?
No, they're the best because they continue to practice over and over and over those fundamentals. And that's where I focus. And when I played sports in my younger years, it's what I focused on as well. Basic dribbling skills in basketball, batting practice for baseball. I never got into soccer, Vasco. Sorry, but
yeah, you're in the wrong side of the Atlantic for that.
yeah. But and even with the things that I'm interested in today. So I've been an avid chess player since I was a child, and I still look at very basic tactical puzzles regularly to build up those patterns and to make sure that I don't miss the simple combinations. And I think that type of work and commitment and dedication to the fundamentals, I think, pays off your entire career.
So Cristiano Ronaldo happens to be a Portuguese, like I am, of course, but he's also the best football or soccer player in the world, at least according to FIFA. There's a very interesting story that when he joined Manchester United, out of still like 19 years old, already quite an amazing player at that age. When everybody went home after practice, he stayed back and he continued to practice, right? He was already a star, at least in Portugal, and later on he became a star worldwide, but he was already a star. He was already very good, but that never stopped him from continuing to practice, like almost as an obsession, wanting to get better. So if we take that now to our role as Scrum Masters and also as coaches in the making, what do you think, Ryan, should be the skills that we practice day in, day out to be better Scrum Masters and better coaches?
So what I have focused on is really myself. And what I have learned recently is that to be a better coach to others, you have to get yourself kind of sorted out first. And I'm not saying I was a wreck or a mess or anything, but I definitely had some mental models that were not working well for me. And so for me, I'm practicing responsibility. And so Christopher Avery's responsibility process and his leadership gift program is something that I have focused on as a coach and something that I've been working through probably for the past year now, just trying to get into a mode of responsibility. And just real quick, what it means is, there's a defeatist attitude that permeates software where we could have delivered, except the product owner didn't give us good requirements, or our build pipeline is broken, so we're stuck for days. And what this does, working out of responsibility, shifts that mindset to how can I respond to this in a way that's powerful and not reactive. And so instead of things happening to me, I'm able to make choices from a position of responsibility, not from a position of blame or guilt or obligation. And so for me, it's just been empowering to start looking at things from a stance of responsibility. It's helped me grow as a person, as a coach. And it's something that I'm actually now teaching all of the teams that I work with, just because it has been such a powerful thing for me.
Absolutely, which reminds me that I should definitely get Christopher on the show to talk more about the responsibility process. Ryan, so we're about to end, but before we do go, do share with us, where can we find out more about you, the work that you're doing as a coach and as a trainer, but also about the podcast that you host, of which a special episode right after this.
Yeah, thanks for that. So ryanripley.com is the website where you can find out all about the podcast, quite a bit about me. I'm also on Twitter. It's at Ryan Ripley. Happy to engage on most topics about whatever you're interested in. If you hit me up on Twitter, happy to discuss. But other than that, I think those are the two best places. I hope everyone enjoys the episode of Agile for Humans following this. If you like it, be sure to subscribe to Vasco's podcast first on iTunes. But once you do that, please subscribe to Agile for Humans as well and join the conversation. Looking forward to future discussions.
Absolutely. Ryan, thank you very much once again for your generosity with your time and your knowledge.
Hey, anytime, Vasco. We need to make sure next time, though, we don't wait about 2 years to talk.
Absolutely. That's not going to happen. Good stuff, Ryan. Enjoy the conference.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, now that you've listened to the interview with Ryan, here is one of the episodes of his podcast, Agile for Humans. Happy listening.
Processes and tools dominate today's Agile discussions, but we are devoted to the individuals and interactions that make it work. From the beginner to the veteran practitioner, we have something for you. Welcome to Agile for Humans.
All right, welcome to this week's episode of Agile for Humans. I'm your host, Ryan Ripley. Joining me tonight, we're back to old school Agile for Humans, actually. This is a panel. In the beginning, it was a large group of people. We got away from that. Now we're back. So we have Woody Zuhl. Woody, how are you?
Doing great, Ryan.
Thanks for joining us. Amitai Schleier. Amitai, no stranger to the show, a fan favorite. How are you, sir?
Thrilled to hear that I'm a fan favorite. That's news to me.
Everyone loves your insights, buddy. You get more tweets than anyone else on the show. Tim Oninger from Northern Illinois. How are you, sir?
Excellent, Ryan. Excellent.
Always wonderful to have the Agile Otter on with us. Top shelf Agile coach and consultant, Zach Bonacker.
Hi, Ryan.
Hey, buddy.
It's cold. I'm in San Diego, and it's under 60 degrees, so it's kind of hard in my world right now, so I appreciate everyone's understanding.
Guess what?
We'll send some hot chocolate out there.
Yeah. We'll get some rations and some provisions out to you.
Appreciate that.
So just so you know, in Indiana, it's over 60 degrees.
Right. So that's why everyone comes out to where you are for the sunshine tax or whatever they call it, right?
Exactly. Well, tonight, guys, we've been batting some ideas around for a large group, what would make sense, and I think we're just going to ask why. Tonight is all about the why of the things we do and of the things that we talk about and think about, why people hire us. What is it about our Agile practice? What is it about the way that we've internalized Agile that makes us unique and all of those things? I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but I think Amitai, when it comes to why Agile, why your approach, why do we do this?
I think I speak for all of us when I say it's the best way to make money that I've found so far. Pretty sure that's why we're all in it. I'm trying to get rich, and it's going really slowly, but it is net in the positive direction.
So you just got your SPC4 and you're ready to get working on SAFe? Is that what I'm hearing?
No, that's a bigger investment than I'm ready for. I was trying to prove it in the small, and I think maybe I could get into a project like getting an SPC certification next.
Nice.
Now that I've validated the idea.
All right, so Amitai's clearly after the money grab. Maybe Tim, what is it that is driving you to continue down this Agile path? What is it that has kept you going, and why are people calling you?
Oh, let's see. I was lucky enough to be in on near the ground floor of some pretty cool things going on, and some people are still interested in how they work. Awful lot of what I do, though, is either introducing people to it for the first time with XP practices and the idea of Agile management and incorporating testers, or just as often, it's a rescue. Somebody has come in and things have gone horribly wrong, and it's time to try something different to change the way it's done. And I'm pretty sympathetic and pretty interested in enough experiences. Sometimes people want to hear from me. I think that's really awesome and humbled by it usually. Every once in a while puffed up.
So do you think we're at kind of a restart point where the first generation of Agilists have cycled through, now it's a new crop of people, and we're seeing the same old things, or is it now something different?
I think we're in a whole different wave. So you know how these things go. You start off with this great idea, and it goes for a while until somebody starts to, it corrupts after a while. A lot of compromises are made in the name of marketing and selling and sharing and spreading, and people get focused on the uptake ratios instead of the difference it makes. And then somebody comes along and there's a reformation, and then that reformation runs for a while, and then the Reformation becomes corrupted, and there's yet another reformation of the Reformation. I think that we're probably in a major reformation cycle. So we've gone from take back Agile to modern Agile, and at the same time, other people are running to keep the uptake ratios good and the numbers looking pretty.
Yeah. Tim, do you think we went about that circle where it was take back Agile into the evolution of modern Agile, or did we just maybe rephrase what we meant all along?
I think it's very much a restatement and an extension. There are a few things that have changed. When we did Agile at first, XP, and I suppose Scrum as well, although I was more connected with the XP people. Continuous deployment, continuous integration, continuous testing, that was a real thing. But somewhere along the line, those have been kind of given away. And nowadays, continual deployment and continual integration are much more continual than they used to be. So with all the DevOps stuff, there's new technical underpinnings that we can leverage. And, we never saw Lean Startup coming. Lean Startup was a surprise. So incorporating that and some other ideas from Lean has been a big deal. So I think there's something different. But ultimately, the values were there to begin with. They just they needed to be brought back forward again. They fell behind, my opinion.
So now someone who's been pushing Agile forward, I think, and breaking new ground is Woody, with no estimates, mob programming, through experimentation, like on past episodes that we've talked about, his ability to just question why about the things that everyone else takes for granted. Most people take the fact that you estimate software, and that's just something you do because the business asks for it, and it's the thing we've always done. But to actually step back and ask the question, why? Or we put people in cubicles and we say, here's your unit of work, go and do it. And instead Woody says why and puts the whole company together in front of one screen, and they get massive quality and output and outcome improvements. And so Woody, what are the things, clearly if we're in a reformation or a restatement, we've had to clarify our point about Agile. But what are the things that we're questioning now that perhaps we didn't question 20 years ago when all of this was being crafted?
Well, that's maybe deeper than I'm able to go, but I think I could say this, that mob programming itself wasn't a questioning it didn't come about by questioning why are we sitting in cubicles. It was the result of turning up the good on ideas like working well together. So if we look at the way that we're doing things and we say, hey, this thing's working, whatever it might be, and we say, what would it mean to turn up the good on that? Then that will take us in a direction that we might not otherwise be able to go in. What I have often seen over many years is people say, we have a problem with this and we need to fix that. Or this isn't going well, so we need to address that. And my approach is a little bit perhaps not typical, but it doesn't mean it's not used. And that is just to say what's going well and let's turn it up. And of course that comes from Kent Beck. I mean, that probably has been around in my life since I was a little kid, but it was expressed so well by Kent Beck in the first edition of the Extreme Programming Explained book. And I usually bring that up in every presentation I give. The idea that we have these practices, we know they work. Not because we got a certification in them or because we read it in a book, but because we've got experience with it. We know it works. What would it be like if we could turn that up? What would it mean to turn that up? And how would we go about doing that? So that's a very different thing than maybe the innovation, the way we might think innovation is, where we look at the problems and we try to figure out a different way to look at that. That's part of it maybe, but anyways. I hope that was helpful.
Definitely. I think we can all talk about the good that we're turning up. It's interesting. When rules emerge, it's usually because something negative has happened, and we're going to create a defense against that ever happening again. And that's how standard operating procedures emerge. That's how all of these volumes and volumes of rules and regulations appear. But that's defending against the bad. What I love about your approach, Woody, is that you're saying, no, that stuff happens, but what are we good at? Or what makes us happy? What brings out the best results? And let's just focus on that. So now you're creating a playbook about the good. You're turning up the good. You're playing to people's strengths. I think it's far deeper than you give it credit for.
Well, so I think it's a fundamental concept. So I would just, for example, this goes way beyond software development. If we are always saying everybody should be able to do this well, whatever this thing may be, then we're probably not taking advantage of the variety of skills and abilities and nature, talents and whatever that everybody has. We let them. We make an environment where people can find what they're really truly going to be able to be great at or bring forward a better chance for that, and maybe we're going to win. There's going to be a win for everybody in that. And winning doesn't mean somebody else has to lose. Winning means that it could mean that everybody wins. That's sort of the way I like to think of it. It's not a war,
What an amazing lesson. And actually, I was privileged enough to be up in where was I? I was up in Winnipeg, Canada at a great conference up there a few years ago, and I got to see this play out, Woody. It was really interesting. I think you'd like this exercise. Todd Sharon was up there doing an improv talk. I'm finding improv is actually highly applicable to some of the work we do. He had a group of 100 people get into two groups and pretend they're doing a tug of war, just as like an icebreaker. So the two sides are there, and we go for a few minutes, and he stopped us, and he said, when is someone going to lose? Because both sides were fighting equally hard to win this pretend tug of war that had absolutely zero bearing, but no one was willing to improv the act of losing. It was a zero-sum game. These are all coaches. So these are all highly experienced agilists still acting in a way that it's zero-sum, someone has to win, someone has to lose, but we can all win. And it was a very impactful idea. It's one of those that it left the whole room of coaches humbled. It's one of those, it's like when you, Woody or Tim or like a George Dinwiddie or a Don Gray walks up to one of us and says something about the way we've just behaved, and we walk away dumbfounded. It was one of those type of moments where the whole room of coaches realized, wow, we tell teams everyone can win, but we just refuse to lose. And it was one of those neat moments.
So I know what you're all thinking, right? Because you're thinking the same thing as me right now. You're thinking all this verbiage and the language we're using around success and positive results. As a result of this approach, this seems like a real certification opportunity. We'll come up with maybe like certified positive agilist.
I will certify you for cheaper than Zach will, just a little bit cheaper, 1 time less.
Yeah, but my training classes won't have PowerPoints, so I'm more engaging. So I want to. Seems
2
like
cents less.
Opportunity.
2 times less. So Zach and Amitai, they're busy setting up their Agile universities. It is an interesting point where, back to what Tim was saying, we have this reformation and then corruption and then reformation and corruption. And I do wonder sometimes. So so the listeners will call back to Tom Cagley and I just this week, or recently, released a show about certifications and conferences and the walls and the dogma that the certifications create. Because it is expensive for a trainer to change course material. The Scrum Alliance can't just change course material or requirements, and neither can Scrum.org. And when they change the Scrum Guide, the cost of updating all of the certification exams, the training materials, it's very significant. And so we talked about the walls that those things put up, the dogma that it creates, and how it can actually stop some of these ideas from moving forward. It'll be years before ideas like no estimates and mob programming, which are excellent Agile ideas, find their way into some of these areas. And maybe that's a good thing.
Well, now, first of all, I am speaking at the Scrum gathering in San Diego on mob programming, to be clear. And I did speak there in the one they did in Vegas on mob programming several years ago. So I'm not really sure that these things can easily fit into whatever the going program might be. But I would say that there is what you're bringing up is sort of the overall issue with how new ideas come forward and what does it take to have that happen. Much of what we believe has to eventually be eroded for us to be able to accept new ideas, and it's very difficult to let go of those things. And there was something we believe in. It's not an easy thing to switch from that. So it can take days, years, months, whatever, long periods of time. And with really big, important scientific changes, it can take centuries. Some of the things that people believed for centuries take centuries to go away. So I'm not really sure. I think that having a framework that you can certify people in is probably it does solidify some of the things beyond the reasonable level. It's kind of like once you put a rule in place, it becomes very difficult to remove that rule. It's really easy to put rules in place and very difficult to remove them. And yet rules usually aren't meaningful to have rock solid. I think that, Tim, you brought that out once. This isn't written in stone, except for that one thing.
Right.
I think it was you who said that. Yeah.
And I should say, during that talk with Tom, we have a lot of respect and admiration for Scrum Alliance and Scrum.org. They are very open to some of these ideas. It was really more the discussion around, are we going to see test questions around some of these advanced concepts anytime soon? And we talked about the pros and cons of changing the base structure and how expensive and difficult that is. And it's just one of those things that inherently, when you go down this path of formalizing Agile and creating certifications, you are going to create some of these things that get put in stone, whether intentional or not, that just become so difficult to break down. I think an example could be the idea of sprint lengths. Just the fact that 4 was mentioned, but now 4 weeks was mentioned early on in the Scrum guide, but now it's switched to 2 weeks. So now these teams are scrambling to get down to 2, even though their user base can't handle more change than perhaps once a quarter. So they're doing.
And they're trying to get there in the worst way possible by working twice as hard, not by doing half as much.
Exactly. And so you have these different things that happen that if we're not careful about how we do these changes, it's all inherent in the system of work that's at play. And so it was just highlighting the fact that these systems of work, especially around certifications, create these very interesting problems. But yeah, I totally agree. Scrum Alliance has put together great programs and really love how open they are to a lot of these ideas.
I think there probably should be some kind of a date on your test and your training. So you can say, hey, I was certified in 2004 Agile. I think that might be helpful. So people, have when you buy a bottle of whiskey, it's probably going to have an age statement on the front. It's probably telling you when it was bottled and how long it had sat in the cask. So you know what you're getting.
So yes, this Agilist will have gone sour by fill in the date.
That's right. Hey, I'm really, really good at 1998.
That's right.
Go ahead.
No, Woody, I'm actually more interested in what you're going to say. Go. I'll raise my hand.
I think many of the ideas that we see expressed in Agile software development and extreme programming and all these approaches were around way, way before any of these things became what they are. So, it's not uncommon to think of doing things in smaller amounts. That's been around forever and ever. And, so on and so on. I don't know, most of these ideas became things because when we grouped them together, they really made a great impact. I think the whole thing with Agile software development, that we're basically going to focus on the people side of the business of software development, but it's really a business-focused thing. It just takes into account that these are individuals, and they got to be able to interact well. We're going to see things changing, and boy, that's tough for people. So how are we going to deal with that? I think all these things, when they gather together, they get a kind of a strength that when they were separate, they weren't perhaps as meaningful. So I think even extreme programming, again, in the first edition of that, it was pretty much, here's some practices. You get the great value of these when you bring them all together, and you don't get as much value if you just pick them out one by one. So it's a powerful thing. I don't mean to say, but I do believe that the practices that we use aren't as important nearly as the principles, and the practices really have to be frequently being scrutinized and changed, and even the principles and values have as well, but to a much more frequent approach with the practices and the techniques and the methods that we use.
Hey everybody, Ryan Ripley here. We're going to take a quick break to hear more from our friends at TechWell about the Agile Dev West Conference and a chance for you to save up to $200 on your registration fee. When we come back, more with this panel. Is your Agile team struggling to be Agile? Turn your team's Agile struggles into learning opportunities for project improvement, product coaching, and measurability, identifying where and when to stamp out our bottlenecks, and embracing the challenges of Scrum and Kanban. Learn how at Agile Dev West, the premier Agile conference, June 4th through the 9th in Las Vegas, Nevada. With over 100 learning and networking opportunities over 6 days, Agile Dev West is the ideal event to find solutions to your challenges. Develop and strengthen skills, supercharge knowledge, and re-energize career growth. Take deep dives into Agile implementation, development, leadership, test and QA, Scrum, enterprise, project management, requirements, and processes and metrics. Agile for Humans listeners can use the code AgileDev to receive $200 off their conference registration fee. Explore the program at well.tc/AgileDev. Do you guys believe that we'll be able to... I'm sorry, go ahead, Zach.
No, Tim has his hand up too.
All
I
right.
don't know. Do we Rochambeau for it, or should we?
All right, Zach, then Tim.
No, okay, so the whole this whole conversation just brings me back to that opening question of why, right? And for me, it's centering on, why, understand why we do what we do, and why that led us to a practice, right? And use that as the learning opportunity, right? So I've had the opportunity to attend a mob programming workshop with Woody. Has anyone else? Tim, have you done it? Ryan?
I've done mob programming, but I don't think I get to go to the workshop.
So that means since I'm the only one, I'm far more enlightened than you. So I'm certified enlightened with Woody. But Woody's workshop goes into a lot of the mindset and the mentality of what he believes in terms of improving working conditions for software engineers, and why that can lead to better results, and and we get into do some games and exercises that demonstrate that thought process and why it made him curious. And then eventually we get to the point where we actually do. And it's presented in a way that is, this is what we're doing, and it isn't necessarily the only way. It is one way of many ways, as you know. So the whole workshop starts from why, and then gets into how and what is actually done, and it's really powerful. There was a time where I used to think that if we did certification in the same way, and almost along the way that you were talking, Tim, where what if we had signs and badges around, I've got 10 years of this, or 5 years, or it's a time, or it's something, or like you said, it's from 96 or 97. I used to think that would be helpful because it would give you some insight. But then again, it still doesn't answer why. Why would I want to do that, right? Because what if I had a 10-year of something, or 15 years Agile certified, but it's just like seeing a resume. I've got 15 years of being a manager at whatever, being a terrible manager, right? Or what if I was certified something in 2005, and yet my mindset has completely shifted from that. So I don't know. I don't know what the point, I don't know what I would be solving or what I would be trying to answer on anything around the certification and how we would label people when it comes to Agile. If I start first with why, there's just no why there for me at all. I don't know. Maybe I'm the only one.
So, of course, what I was shooting at with that was to give people the date at which you stopped learning, the date at which your material stopped advancing. So, when you take the whiskey from the barrel and you put it in a bottle, it doesn't age anymore. It's done.
Right.
So that's when it stopped growing. That's when it stopped improving. Now it can sit in the bottle for 50 years and it's the same whiskey for 15 years, 20 years, 300 years, as long as it's kept in a nice place. So I thought, most people have no idea if the Agile that they studied and got certified for was 20 years old or not. They have no idea. But I really was doing that as a joke. I'm anti-certification. We've been making a lot of jokes, and I've been enjoying them. But there's a whole series of diseases, right, that are dealing with premature bone ossification. So your bones are supposed to be growing, but instead they harden and freeze in their current shape, and that just messes your body up horribly. These are terrible childhood diseases and adult diseases, calcification of blood vessels and muscles, and it's incredibly painful. I'm not making light of those conditions. Those are serious, serious problems and very, very painful. But what happens with any kind of a system where we set the rules and we decide what the criteria is and we build the learning path and we hold to it, we have ossified. It is fine to have a certified degree in 15th century literature, but probably you shouldn't do that in things that are still growing and changing. If you got your 15-year-old certification in Java development, congratulations. What was that, Java 2? So I just wanted to push the idea that maybe these things ossify, and we'll talk probably a little bit, we'll get around to talking about bridges and tunnels and how ossification is destroying that system. But I'll let you go.
So I would like to interject. This is Woody. I'd like to interject here. What I believe typically happens, and at least this is my take on it right now, is that when a system gets to the place where it's recognizable as a system and people are using it, then its main ability, its main capability is to perpetuate itself. The reason it has gotten that far is because it's good at perpetuating itself. And if the main features of it are no longer useful, then we have a problem, because it's gotten to the point where it perpetuates itself and we cannot make it change. Now that, of course, isn't original with me. Nothing that I probably can talk about is something that I came up with. It's based on things I've read, and that's from John Gall's book, Systemantics. The Systems Bible, I think, is what it was called. And it's a great book. It's a lot of fun to read. And but I think this is valid. And I see it over and over again. So what we really have to ask is, I think this is why I like the turning up the good on things, is if we really cannot change a system, a complex system that's in place, that it's solidified to the point where it's just self-perpetuating, then we need to figure out what are we going to do. We can't just cast them aside, because part of their job is keeping themselves in place. So we really need to start figuring that out. It's a much, much bigger thing than some people. It's like Deming kind of stuff where he talked about, I think it was him, that a bad system will destroy a good person every time. It's just the way it is. But please go ahead.
Woody, so turning up the good, right, as a means of looking into, again, improving the results of the system. Do you ever see problems, though, that need to be addressed? And what do you do in that case then?
Well, there's going to be a number of problems that we need to just directly address, right? So I'm not saying we don't pay attention to problems. It's that it's not our focus to be looking for these problems. If they come forward, in other words, if we spend time focusing on looking for the problems, then we're not going to run out of problems. What I found by turning up the good is that many of the problems fade away. So where focusing on the problems didn't make them fade away, it actually can act as I would say, as a placebo, because we end up working on a symptom, and we feel that when we've resolved for the symptom, we don't have a problem anymore, but the problem has now just been hidden, or it's now under the surface. So we didn't use our approach to actually solve the problem. So this is something we really need to watch out for, and we get a lot of good out of, I think, almost automatically from turning up the good. I wouldn't propose that as though the only thing there is.
I think all good ideas have a root in either Kent Beck, Virginia Satir, or Jerry Weinberg. And Woody, you just made me think of Rudy's Rutabaga, where there's an infinite number of problems. And once you solve your biggest problem, your second biggest problem gets a promotion. Right. And so there's always going to be those issues. And so turning up the good, I think, is a great way to get out of that vicious cycle of just problem solving. You're so reactionary in that mode when you can be strategic about the good things you turn up. But what about Agile? So when we think about Agile in its current state today, everyone can cite a problem. Some people don't like SAFe. Some people don't like the other thing, like certification. Some people don't like Scrum. Some people think that such things are bad. But when you think about the good, for me, turning up the good is actually paradoxical. Because when I think of what is the good in Agile, a big part of it for me is the diversity. So the Agile community has one of the best male to female ratios that I've ever seen in a software context. It has all walks of life, all countries, all continents. Wherever software is done, we have practitioners. And we have this diverse set of ideas. We have Amitai and Tim and Woody, who come from a very technical background. Amitai uses various languages. Woody's uses others. Tim's a Python master. Amitai's a Perl expert. Woody, I think, what's your main programming language, Woody?
Well, for the first 15 or so years was BASIC.
So Woody's old school with basic and can probably pick up any language he needs to. Zach and I, on the other hand, so I started as a Java developer, but I moved into a different path. And so Zach and I are more on the coaching side of things now, where we're looking at business processes and systems. But it's the diversity in our viewpoints and our experiences that make this community so interesting and so capable to look at systems of work, find out what's good, and turn it up, because we have so many different viewpoints. At the same time, these viewpoints become targets. Dean Leffingwell saw a hole left by various certification bodies and trainers and said, hey, I'm going to show traditional corporations how they can get some better outcomes without having to change too many of the systems in their current status, or that are currently in place. But that became a target, although it is one diverse idea within the Agile space. And so I think our greatest asset, the greatest thing to turn up, can also be the greatest thing that tears us apart. I'm wondering what you guys think about that.
I don't know. I think for me, turning up the good is barely about software. It's even more barely about Agile. Someone told me when I was much younger that I should consider, and this was a very surprising piece of advice that they gave me. They said I should consider a career as a therapist. And I thought, what the hell are you talking about? I'm a programmer. Go away. And also, then I gave it a second thought, because it was interesting. And I said, okay, so what would be involved in being a therapist? There would be a lot of work to figure out how to basically, I think it's the same thing, love the people that I'm trying to consult for. And then at the end of the day, working really hard to love these people who are paying me to figure out how to love them, come home and try to love my loved ones. And that sounds impossible. I don't think I can handle that. So I'm going to take that as a compliment, that I should consider that as a career path, and I'm going to set it aside. And then a decade later, I'm a software development coach, which is basically taking that person's advice. Because what I do isn't primarily that I help you with Perl or Python or C or God knows what. It's not even primarily that I help you figure out how to get an increment shipped. It's you are a person, you're a human being, you're in a context, you're running into friction somehow, you're having a hard time being who you are in a context that needs you to be who you are, and maybe doesn't even know that. And my job is to make some room in that context for you to be more of who you are, and help you realize that that's something you can do at work, and that work needs that from you. And it's a little bit about the programming, it's a little bit about the shipping, and it's a lot about the people. And to me, that is where all of the good is. And it's our job to help them have it.
So I think I understand the question based on Amitai's response, because that resonates with me. Ryan, ask the question again in just one sentence so that my, non super intelligent mind can grasp the brilliance of it in its entirety.
So we talk about turning up the good. So what about Agile? What does that mean when you think about today's state of Agile and the good within it, and what do we turn up?
Got it. All right. So for me, this question centers really on the fact that I love software development because I can program a little. You guys want me to write a mean console program right now in C#? I'll do it.
Nice.
No, so I can fit in with you guys now. I love software development, but like I said, was never a great, programmer. My mind just somehow didn't work that way. And that's what I tell myself. Helps me sleep at night. But again, I love creating with people. I love technology and software. I think it's exciting. I started my career at a software company where I realized everybody was miserable. And over time, I started connecting patterns that at least I believe that the traditional organization, whatever that is, but we kind of know what we're saying in the Agile space. It's kind of maybe following some old Tayloristic models or some real belief in behaving hierarchically, but that system can bring out the worst in people, right? I mean, I experienced it, and I can see it when, did you guys read that article that was posted from, I forget, but she was an engineer at Uber. Did everyone read that? So you get this whole, you get, reports from people going to work and hearing about, being harassed or being, involved in a culture that is just to abuse one another and defeat one another so that they can get promoted for what, it's like you want to be the best at that culture, and that's what we produce. And on top of that, we have a lot of great principles about software development that seem to be really great at building software. So when we look at that holistically across the entire organization, I see this area where I can fit in, and it feels extremely meaningful to me to, turn up the good, not to do Agile in a series of, practices, or to say that, hey, we cut our delivery time. We were shipping once every 3 months, and now we're doing it every 2 weeks. That's great and all, right? But what really, resonates with me and what at least this question means is the idea that we can improve the experience of people working with one another to become better human beings, to become better at their careers, to become better at themselves, to maybe learn new skills, to maybe be excited about work, to really feel like they can be part of something and learning. We can do all of that as a place of work beyond just a status of my title or my money or whatever it is that I'm making. If I think about the old, traditional model, we can give them more than that. And at the same time, we can really improve the results of developing software, which is exciting because I think technology and software is, just the bee's knees. So I want to turn it up for that, not just to do Agile, right? But just to realize that where I was when I started in my career, where I was labeled, arrogant, narcissistic, mean, hard to get along with, insulting, condescending.
Zach, I'm sorry. I'm sorry about those, buddy. I was wrong.
Yeah, right. Meanwhile, we're still friends now. But, to know that that's where I was, and I was starting to demonstrate some of the characteristics of the organization around me, and then to realize that I can learn and become a better person and grow. That to me is what, turning up the good is, right? Is becoming somebody who enjoys now teaching and working with people and advising them and mentoring them and partnering with them and just learning from them. That's what I want to turn up, right? So that we have more organizations all across the world that do this for humanity with the side benefit of creating really amazing software and technology, driving the world forward. So that's such puppies and kittens, but that's what I hear, when you ask that question.
Preach it, my brother. That is the stuff. Now, I was joking at the beginning a little bit when I said that this is the best way I figured out how to get rich, but I was not completely joking, because what Zach said, I think, rings very true for me as well, that it's not merely that I'm there to love people and to help them be more of themselves and to help that be more effective at work. It is about the money. I learned this in the simplest possible terms from G. Paul Hill, who you should have on your show. We've mentioned him on past shows before. It's one of his mantras. He's got a lot of them. And one of them is it's about the money. We test drive because we think it's faster. We test drive because it helps us ship. It helps us solve the right problems. We don't do these things because they make us feel good. We don't do them because they give us a sense of craftsman-like expertness. We do them because the business benefits in the terms that it cares about, even if it doesn't know that yet when we work in this way. So it is about the money. And when I joke that Agile is the best thing I've found so far to get rich, it's not only for me that that's true. It's for everybody involved, as far as I'm concerned. That's true. The people on the teams, the managers, even if they don't think there's a role for them in this future world, there is, and there's money in it for them, and company as a whole, of course.
So, Tim, a lot of this reminds me of make people awesome. Is that where we're going with this?
That's absolutely, I think, where we're going. So one of the things that we focus on a lot, that we talk about, establishing safety, right? So that we can all bring our talents to bear. Most organizations have a lot of divisions and a lot of blame shifting. And, there's things that are troublesome, but you're not going to fix those. What you can do is start establishing safety. Sometimes people have bugs that go out live, and you can help them to not do that. But you can take that up another step higher. There are mistakes that get established that you can maybe, by cranking up the good and creating safety, those things don't happen. And then once you have a little bit of safety, then people realize the goal here is to make everybody awesome. It's not just, here's a feature that somebody's paying for, we'll collect our money, that'll be good for us. It is, here is something that's going to make somebody better off in the field. But it's also, if we do this a certain way, it's going to make it easier for our customer service people. It's going to make it easier for the salespeople to sell, which, by the way, is good for us too. And I can write my code in such a way using craftsmanship so that the people who work with me, they can get things done faster too. I'm not competing against them. We're trying to make each other better so that we can soup this thing up and get going. I think that the make people awesome and the safety elements, and of course that's from modernagile.org, but don't worry about where it's from. I think those two things are cranking up the good in a huge way. And there's some other things that we do to try to get, to help the businesses go further and longer. But all of this leads to learning and caring and sharing and transparency and openness, not because it makes you feel good. We never have people hold their hands and talk about their feelings and sing together. Hold your hands, look the others in the eye, sing a song. We never do that because, that of course, that's silly. We are here to help them achieve their goals, not to make ourselves feel good about the work we're doing. And that's cool, I think.
A direct outcome from this kind of thinking is actually this podcast. I'm sure I've talked about this on past episodes, but this show has, over the last couple of years, has grown into one of the top shows in its category. We have some great guests on every week, wonderful interactions with all of my friends, and people ask, how do you get tens of thousands of downloads? How do you get advertisers? How do you grow it into something that it is? And I have two principles for this show, and it's I love my friends, and I want to make them as wildly successful as possible. And so what that means is I minimize myself. I amplify the good that everyone on this show brings. So when Amitai and Zach and Tim and Woody are on, we get them to the forefront, and it just works. But it's the two things that we're talking about. It's you love your friends or your coworkers, you want to make them awesome, and in my case, I want everyone to be as successful as possible. So we push Amitai's Agile in 3 Minutes, which is arguably one of the best Agile podcasts on iTunes. We push anything that Tim and Industrial Logic and Modern Agile has going on at the time. Zach, we push him to get submissions and talks and all of those things out there so that he's getting his awesome Agile perspective out into the world. With Woody, it's always a treat to have him on to talk about mob programming, experimentation, no estimates, and even just the storytelling. What a masterful storyteller, and it's a real treat for people to get to hear him. And even when he talks about where he learned his storytelling talent, I don't know if we've covered that on the show yet or if that was at Coach Camp, but that's something I'd love to get into someday as well. But the point is, these are four talented people that bring forward amazing things, and I love them and I want them to be as wildly successful as possible. And that's grown this show into what it is today. And I think we can take that and apply it to software teams and to building homes and to whatever it is that you do to turn up the good.
I'd like to bring up something here, and I think that the focus on business shouldn't be about the success of making more and more money and making lots of money. That's sort of like a side result of making it a sustainable and wonderful life for the people involved, and that goes in all directions. The customers, the people that are creating things are the people that are vendors to us and where we're getting our supplies and materials from, and so on and so on. So I think that this is a much, much bigger thing than just making money. And I would say making money has got to be the smallest part of success. Being sustainable might require that we make money, but I think that we really trick ourselves when we make that the goal, as according to people like John Kay, who'll say, if we just went for our goal, then it's going to pervert itself quickly. If our goal is to make money, then we'll do things that are that ruin our chances of having sustainability and having wonderful results because our goal is the wrong kind of goal. But Zach, you have something you'd like to say.
Yeah, no, it was just what you said was like spot on for me. Because what I said earlier, I just think it's funny that you bring up the idea of it isn't about money. It's not about these are almost like in the words of Don Reinertsen, like a proxy variable, right? If we're doing the really systemic things right, then the good outcomes, the money, the results, those are going to happen. So the idea
Maybe.
of centering around on the system of work to be human friendly, to really be human friendly, to be, to provide the space for people to be creative and learn and really get good at what they do, right, and enjoy that. It kind of, speaks to me or pulls at me, because I get called, in work usually to come into situations where people are trying to work with the principles that we're talking about here, right? That's truly what they mean when they say, hey, we're trying this agile transformation or whatever it is. But their mindset is exactly the opposite of what we're talking about. It's around, how do we drive them to follow the process? How do we train them to do the outcome we want? How do we do whatever? I don't know if I've said it on the show. I probably have, because it's one of my favorite stories, but because it describes the mindset that for me is the most common thing that I interact with, in general in my career so far. And it was at an agile meetup a couple of years ago, where there was a vice president from a banking company that was there, a vice president of IT or something. And after hearing a lot of the conversation, similar themes that we were saying here, she said, "This sounds great and all, but in my agile transformation, the bottom line is that I have a business to run, not a daycare to manage," right? And I could hear that and just say to myself, I don't know how you're ever gonna deliver or create the what agile really is and what it can deliver with that type of mindset.
So have you gentlemen heard of a book called The Art of Possibility? Rosamund Stone Zander, Benjamin Zander. I'm not sure exactly of the copyright. It's not a new book. It's been around for a while. I need permission real quick. Ryan, if I were to read a paragraph, would that be a problem?
No, go ahead.
Okay.
We'll get sued later.
Okay. So the first chapter is called It's All Invented, which is an interesting viewpoint. It's important as you're coaching, as you're going into places where they're locked into the rules. But let me read a little piece for you. It says, standard social and business practices are built on certain assumptions, shared understandings that have evolved from older beliefs and conditions. And while circumstances may have changed since the start of these practices, their continued use tends to reconfirm the old beliefs. For this reason, our daily practices feel right and true to us regardless of whether they have evolved to keep up with the pace of change. In just such a way, a business culture arises and perpetuates itself, perhaps long after its usefulness has passed. When I talk about the Reformation and cranking up the good, I want to bring up the idea that perpetuated set of beliefs used to be the waterfall. Today, it's largely command and control agile.
It's true.
And I want to support Woody asking his questions. That's what this is all about. It's all invented. Business practices were not handed down from God. We've all invented those over time. It's a set of agreements.
Things are the way they are because we made them that way, which can seem depressing if you think about it in terms of the behaviors that people chose that got us to this point, but can also lift that depression when you realize that we can freely choose anything else as soon as we can figure out how.
The corollary to that rule is, if we don't change where we're going to end up there.
Yeah, so knowing that this is like fundamental to me, knowing that where we think we want to go is not really the right place to be going is worth understanding. So we often, I think, take steps in a direction that we shouldn't be, and because we are working on the information that we think this is what we want to do, instead of proving it as we go, and we become, I would consider a lot of times, hardened into the idea that we have to stay on this path that's taking us where we knew we wanted to go. And then when we finally get there, we're going, well, why isn't it the way we hoped it would be? But that's because the chance to getting to where the goodness we wanted exists is not the path to the goodness that we think we want exists. So it's the goodness that we really want to have is not something we can just pick out and run for.
Constant value discovery is so much at the heart of all of our Agile methods that it's amazing to me that we often don't apply them to our Agile methods.
Do you think? Go ahead.
That was it. I was just saying we can.
I just wonder, when we look at methods and practices, is there ever a time where we get to such a refinement that we're actually aligned with our principles and we get there? Or do you think it's a constantly moving target? Like, what is nirvana, guys? What is the end game?
This is the idea of the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. It's constantly moving. You can never get to it. So, that's maybe a philosophy that's a little deeper than I can know how to explain. But this is about the journey, not about the destination. So, if we're really on this thing, we know when we get to the destination, then we've achieved whatever it was we wanted to do, and there's nothing else to go for. After that, we probably are going to be somewhat disappointed. I could be wrong about that.
Like a dog that catches the car. Now what?
So Toyota's been doing Kaizen for 40, 50 years, and they haven't run out of improvements at all. But I worked with some guys who did MVS, CICS, DB2, COBOL. And you know what? They were really,
hold on,
really good
Tim.
at that.
Hold on, Tim. For the kids listening, this is the mainframe. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, yes. Big blue boxes you may have heard about, or may not. They were really good at that. But in the meantime, people came up with whole new ways for us to be awesome, whole new ways to let people be cool. I'm holding in my hand. This is like a 3 or 4 year old cell phone with a touch screen on the front. It's running Android. They keep coming up with cool things that can make me more able to do my daily life and get around. There's a thing in there to help me find good gas prices. There's a thing in here to help me not forget to go to meetings. There's a GPS because I'm directionally challenged. I can get lost in a phone booth. I would say that about the time that we get good in the steady state gets changed. There's always a new way to be cool and awesome and to help people.
Yeah, it's a belief that, excellence is a real thing. It exists. And as long as you keep your eyes open, every day you might get a better idea of what that is. And 20 or 30 years later, you'll be closer to understanding it. And that'll be cool because that day you'll be further ahead, but then that day you'll still get a better idea of what it could be as long as you keep your eyes open for it, right? And that's really kind of a driver, at least I think, and why we say continuous improvement in Agile, but I just think holistically that idea of excellence, that's a real thing. And we just got to continue to experiment and ask what it might be and keep our eyes open each day and keep adding features to the phone,
So I think I'm going to add a question. I was just going to say, I think I'm going to add a question to my retrospectives about what are the good things we can turn up, and then maybe every other daily Scrum ask, what good have we turned up? So I think this is foundational and important, and if we don't make it part of our mindset and practice, we lose it. Yeah. So that's definitely an action I'm pulling away from this conversation.
That's a good thing. I believe that the idea that we can ask ourselves every day, like we had done sometimes, with the original team where we came up with the mob programming at Hunter, the idea that we could ask ourselves at the end of the day, what went well today and how can we turn that up for tomorrow? Not what went well over the last 2 weeks and what might be due to turn it up over the next 2 weeks. That's sometimes good too, but I think it's really useful to just pay attention in the small. What went well today? Can we turn it up? That's the idea. If we can turn up everything that's good, a little tiny bit every day, we'll get a compounding value that we don't get if we wait for 2 weeks to do that.
And I think that's actually the magic. Sorry, I'm going to do one more and then I'll shut up. I'll probably cut this out, but I think this is the magic of mob programming, and that it is really a continual retrospective, even though it's a programming exercise too. And so you are continually inspecting and adapting as a collective team the good and the bad, the code, the tests, everything that you're doing. And it's almost like you're just making these micro adjustments in real time, continually turning up the good things that the group collectively agrees on and finds. And I think that's actually the magic behind it. It's not the programming aspect is certainly important. I mean, that's what we're doing, but it's these micro adjustments in this just constant rapid. It's like this rapid and continual improvement space that it creates that I think is just phenomenally underestimated and misunderstood still in the community. But I think through Woody's evangelism and through the books and some of these talks, I think these things will come to the forefront and people will realize just how important this continuous improvement and continuous learning really is.
That's exactly where I was headed, especially given that Woody was the one telling us that you can retrospect more often than your iteration boundary. You can retrospect every day. You can also retrospect in a mob programming context very easily every commit, which could be, every 5-10 minutes. You can also retrospect in the middle if it seems like it's going to be a while before this is going to turn into a commit.
So
someone that I think is really good at that. Yeah, go ahead.
We used to call that, and I'm sure they still do there, just-in-time retrospectives. So as soon as you know something worth holding on for a retrospective, it's probably a good time to just go ahead and discuss it.
Exactly.
Did you notice what went well right then? Did you notice there was something we needed to figure out here, or whatever it might be? It doesn't have to be just the good, but good stuff is particularly good to retrospect on.
When the rationale for the small ones being especially valuable is that the distance in time and the contingency, if you look at it as just an animal behavior situation, and we want to modify our behavior when we notice we should, the contingency is shorter, the feedback is faster, and we can connect the way that we felt from the thing that we remember still because it was recent to the change in behavior that we want to have soon. As opposed to leaving it for a week, maybe we forgot about it, maybe we forgot a salient detail, maybe we don't even remember it at all, and it's hard to think about what we're going to do differently because we don't remember what we were doing that led to the mistake. If you can just
the
catch
context
it
gets
in the
lost.
moment. Yeah, and the only way you have the context is seconds or minutes later.
It strikes me that a lot of what we were talking about too, I hear some of the principles of appreciative inquiry in here as well too, about looking to the future and what we want to be, taking the time to, again, reflect on what we're doing, to tell stories about it, to share our experiences, but again, visioning why we're doing these retrospectives again because we have a vision in mind of what we want to do, and we can constantly talk about it. So just throwing that out there again, the principles of positive or appreciative inquiry seem like a common thread here to me. So
I think there's a lot of value in paying attention, and I think that's a big part of what I felt has been my focus for about 10 years now. Just simply not shutting off when we're focusing on something that we feel we need to be focusing on, because it's the little things that are sliding by. And maybe that's the big value of a coach on a team, that when the players are in the middle of the activity, like if you think about a sports team, when you're in the middle of a game, you can't observe everything that's going on around you. You've got to have some other people around, and you can think of them as coaches who are watching for the things we need to look at and talk about immediately afterwards. What could have we done a little differently in these little spots? And that's a type of paying attention, which you can do better as a team than you can do sometimes as an individual, because you can only think about one or two things at a time. I think nowadays they've sort of proved you can think of about maybe a half a thing at a time, and that's about it, But I think Tim's got something he's dying to say. I'm not sure.
You're very astute. You recognize all my body language.
Well, it's pretty easy with this. Your face is much larger than most people's, just as mine is.
That's right. I have the proceeding forehead, which helps give me more face to work with.
That's right.
One of the things that a lot of people have built an ethic around is working really hard. And the nice thing about a coach is a coach walks in and he's got a different set of eyes. I agree with what you said, Woody. It's somebody who comes in and sees things differently and can call them out. Clearly, I don't want people to work hard. I think that working hard is a little embarrassing and shameful. What I really want is for people to be easily accomplished. And that's usually done I agree with you that through marginal gains. There's a little blog at Industrial Logic called Small Things. The author's name may be familiar to you. And we talked about the Great Britain cycling program, and we talked about mindless eating and mob programming and Paul Akers' book on 2-second improvement. There's even some XKCD in there, but it's all about how little things add up to make your life easier, how things get done better if we pay attention and don't work hard, just make things easier.
When you take these high-level athletes, you take a Tiger Woods at the top of his game, he had a swing coach. So even arguably the greatest golfer to ever play the game, with one of the nicest swings ever, still has a coach watching him constantly to make sure that his hands aren't dropping or that he's getting his bottom hand rotated over on time at the right point of the swing. And so even the most elite of people at their craft have people whose sole job it is to pay attention, make observations, provide some insights, conduct some experiments, and interpret the results. I think that's just absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, I think, Tim, you said a good thing there that you put in the chat notes. You know, it's like it's a good chance that Tiger's a lot better golfer than that coach is, but that's not the point of it, right? I really have always enjoyed. I remember when I was a kid in school running track. I was never real good at it, but I liked being on the track team, and I liked getting out and running. And I remember the coach telling me one day, he says, you know, at the end of that race, I was running a 2-mile race. That used to be a race people would run. Nowadays, they measure it in different measurements. But in the 2-mile race, it was considered a pretty long race in the track team. He says, you know, at the end, you sprinted to the finish line. You had a lot of energy there. And what he was saying was, you didn't use up enough energy during the race. You saved it for the finish. And that was a really astute thing, because I was still learning at how much of my energy can I use on the throughout the race and still have some left over to sprint. But if you're saving up too much, then you're not getting the good time that you may have otherwise could have gotten. And I've held that with me for years because his point was really well taken for me. And I started learning how to expend that energy in a more even way throughout the race. I remember several other aspects of the coaches on that little high school track team that just helped me think about coaching. Matter of fact, I think I'd like to share another one that was, I never played basketball in high school. I wasn't really tall enough, strong enough, but just playing during the physical education class, the coach said, you know, none of you guys can really do a great job of making baskets here because you're still all too short for these basket setups that we've got here. He says, so the key thing is passing the ball to someone else who's in a better position than you to try to make a basket. So your contribution really is to look for who on the team you can get the ball to right now who has a chance of furthering the team a little bit. And I have taken that with me now. I've had to relearn it several times. I think that's a powerful thought. Now, whether that's really true, outside in the world of basketball, I don't know, because I've never done anything with that. But just the idea that who can you hand this to who's going to make us move further along quicker and better, and then that's not a bad thing. So that's kind of the coaching attitude. We're looking for those things that will help us. That it's hard to notice when you're in the midst of it.
So I'm hearing us say that the idea of an agile coach, even though it's kind of a made up thing, and it might look like anything in the context of the team or the organization, but that they're not useless. They're useful things, right? And that it's a relief.
Well, now we got to really be careful, because I don't really know what we mean by agile coach. I think I'm thinking myself right now as kind of an agile guide, because I think of it as I can say, here's some things we probably need to be paying attention to, and here's some techniques that we can use for doing that, and here's some things I've noticed. And here's some things that have worked for me, but I can't do a lot more than that, because the people I'm working with usually have to figure it out for themselves. I can't Unless I would be somewhere for a very long period of time, I'm not sure I can observe enough stuff. But I do like to watch for things like, do you have a place where you collect the items from your retrospective that you want to improve on? And why are there so many things there? Why aren't they moving into some done column somewhere? I mean, I'm saying this almost as a humorous thing, but there are little things you can notice like that you can quickly point out. But that's just a few of them. It's like we can't really know. We can see the tip of the iceberg, but really the iceberg's where the action's at. Yeah.
I kind of said that, jokingly, but then sort of to self-reassure as well. But anyways, I've always kind of wondered if maybe the idea, since again, Agile Coach, it really is a made up, title. But what if we let Agile Coach be something that is really centered around the technical practices to really help, people understand how to become better software engineers by perhaps using techniques and methods of building software that they've never tried before, like a test-first approach or something, right? What if that was really an Agile Coach? Would there still be room for somebody else to, guide people and to work with people, just like you said, an Agile guide? And I think so. What was really interesting about this conversation for me personally is I've always rejected the sports analogy to coaching, right? Because it's always been presented to me in a way that just felt terrible. Well, that's right, because what was that an example, of someone saying to me recently, see, the coach is useful, right? Because the coach is going to tell the number 2 batter in the lineup that he's not performing, and so he's moving him to 8, and that's the coach's job, is to make those decisions for people, or to go in there and tell them what the play is and exactly how they're going to do it, and go. And I've never, that's never been a very good, analogy for me. But we were talking about things completely different, which were just around observing and supporting and giving people the insight to make it possible for that athlete to become better, right? To create the space where improvement is possible, right? And that, I've never heard it phrased that way, like a swing coach.
So there are a lot of things related to this in many walks of life. For example, if somebody wants to become a better singer and you get a singing coach, that coach is going to be very similar to the way I was describing what a sports coach might be able to do. A fitness coach would be another example, and so on. So there are lots of environments where these things are helpful. Matter of fact, there's people who, they're specialized in things like organizing your home and these sort of things. And this isn't about telling people, well, you need to make a cubby hole to put this thing, and you need to, build a shelf for that thing. It all has to do with how we approach the psychology of these things, and not necessarily the physical parts of them. I would say, though, I've always appreciated having a good coach, and I've turned to people. You can think of them sometimes as mentors as well, but that's a different thing. I've had a few that I would consider people that were mentors, and that's a different thing maybe than a coach, but that's not a bad thing either. Lots of ways to get help and to provide help. Well, I'm glad that we've had this introduction. Are we ready to start recording our talk today, or are we already done with it? Where have we gotten here?
We took a long, winding road that was an excellent journey. We may have not hit the destination we intended, but I think we wound up in the right place.
Is this a Douglas Adams or whatever his name is quote?
No.
Yeah, the house on the beach is a place where land and water come together. It's constantly changing. There's always something new to see. Coaching is a house on the beach.
Oh, nice. Nice.
I like that.
So I think that's a really excellent place to wrap this one up, guys. But I just want to say it's fun to get back to the old school group. We never know where these are going to go, but I think we wound through enough interesting and diverse spaces that I think there's something in here for everyone. So thanks for getting the group back together, and really appreciate you guys doing this. And the listeners, in all seriousness, the downloads just keep going up. We get great emails, tweets, tons of support. Just really appreciate all of that. It's because of all of you being out there and listening and sharing the show and sharing your comments that we're able to grow and to do more and more shows and to have these great people on. So thank you so much for being out there. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for supporting the show and just for all that you do to help get the Agile message out. So with that said, panel, Woody, Amitai, Tim, and Zach, thanks for being here. All of you listeners out there, have a great night.
Thanks for listening to Agile for Humans. Let's keep the conversation going. Drop us a question on Twitter @AgileForHumans or visit agileforhumans.com.